Okay. So really, we're going to do a quick intro here before we get started. And first, we're going to have Mr. Jackson call for roll call, and then we'll get going here. I believe, Michael, you're going to be calling each individual delegate.
Well, Mr. Chair, I think let's do it for tonight. This meeting is not for purposes of making any decisions. I included the roll call option on here just in case there was a thought process that we needed to make a decision for tonight, but there is no motion that is before you. This is really an informational session. So my recommendation, with your permission, is that we proceed without having to do a roll call, knowing that definitely on the 26th of January, when we do the final session, we'll need to do it.
Of course. Yep, I agree. Okay, so we'll just kind of dive in here. Let me give you a little quick intro. I want to thank everyone for taking your time to attend these series of special meetings that we're going to have to kind of finalize and look after some really important business of the association. As you all are aware, we have some housekeeping documentation with the state of Florida that needs to be addressed, and that's what we're going to be doing over the next 3 sessions. Just kind of give you a quick recap, I'll let you know how it's going to work. Session 1 will be tonight, session 2 will be next Tuesday, and session 3 will be the following Tuesday. Look at the website for any information and agendas that are going to be posted and any updates. The first 2 sessions are going to be informative, as Mr. Jackson just mentioned. We're going to present the changes that we're looking to make, and also and show you how to make comments, and so we can answer your question appropriately. I want to introduce everyone quickly. So I want to introduce the House of Directors Board. We have the immediate past speaker, Gary Costens, here. We have our 3 elected directors, Jeanette Connolly, Kathy Petsos, and Barbara Beadle. We also have our vice speaker, Alex Pitlars. We have myself as the 2020-2021 Speaker of the House. And then we also have Joe Scuro, our president, Dan Buffington, our president-elect, and David McCary, our chair of the board. Finally, we also have Michael Monet, our parliamentarian, which is extremely important, and I want to mention how this meeting is going to go. I'm going to rely on Michael to keep us following parliamentary procedures throughout this meeting, and we're going to try to stick to the agenda as much as possible. I know we want to hear everyone's voice, and we're going to do that. It may be through public comment tonight, or it may be through written comment. Just to give you a quick, preface to this, is the House of Delegates Board. We're here to present you what has been given to us and tasked to us from the executive committee. And we're just here to facilitate the process for these changes to be made. It's imperative that we act on these. That's why we're having these meetings, obviously, because the association currently cannot operate until we make these necessary changes or make changes in this type of fashion, which will be described to you very shortly. So I just want to let you know that we're just here to facilitate. I want to keep it all very clean and very organized. I sent everyone the House rules a couple of days ago. I will go over those right now just to be brief. So if you want to pull them up, you can. They're online and also emailed to you. But number 1, the delegates and members will only be recognized for comment after approval through the hand raising in the webinar. So there's a hand in the bottom of your screen, as everyone wants to take a second to look there. Does everyone see that? The ability to raise their hand? Perfect. Got it. There you go. Excellent. Okay. Number 2, I assume that people that are raising their hands right now are just trying it out. Is that true? Any comments will be put into the chat. I encourage you to keep the chat field open at all times on the right-hand side of your screen. You'll click the chat button. It'll open up and everything will be there. Make sure that your 2 at the bottom, the 2:, is to all panelists and attendees, or all panelists, depends on who you want to send that message to. The all panelists is the House of Delegates board, and also the officials being our president-elect, chair, and parliamentarian. So make sure that you address who you want to in that box over there. Once you raise your hand, you'll be addressed. Speakers will have 2 minutes. So we're going to be timing you. The way that's going to work is as soon as we acknowledge you, the clock will start. We will call time, and we will let you finish that point, of course, as you can't see a clock in front of you. So when time is called, you'll have an opportunity to complete your point and your sentence, and then we'll go from there. That's to respect everyone's time and allow everyone to have that comment period. Speakers will be only recognized if time is permitted. We're going to be sticking to the strict 6 to 8 p.m. if we even need to. I anticipate these first 2 meetings will go pretty quickly based on there just being the presentations of the articles and the changes. The House has the right to mute a speaker should he or she go over on time or not address the subject in question. I probably won't need to use this, but I just want to be, make sure we're clear that, we have that hard stop at 2 minutes. We have to. We're also allowing you to present written comments and questions. So we're giving everyone ample time to hear their and address their issues. It may not be with your voice on the screen tonight, but we will get to your questions and we will answer them no matter what, I promise. And the open discussion won't be allowed if questions are not previously answered. I know this is important because I know we want to ask questions and some of them may be answered in the written. We want to answer as many questions possibly written so we have documentation so you have time to look at those and read them. So we're not going to be answering or addressing questions should they be already answered previously in either this meeting or the written comment period. And then there will be no open comment period in meeting 3. I'm going to reiterate these rules every meeting. Meeting 3 is only the purpose of calling the question. Okay, so it's imperative that we get all of our comments and all of our questions addressed in these first 2 meetings. Our idea was, this is a lot of work for everyone, a lot of time commitment. So we appreciate everyone spending their time, but we wanted to make sure that we gave everyone ample time to look over the changes and make sure that they're getting an explanation on everything that's going on. Our goal was to to basically overextend ourselves and make ourselves accessible to you over a 3-week period. So I hope that's okay. With that said, we're going to get started. So we can go back to the agenda. We have, everyone's reviewed the agenda. We have to accept the agenda. I'll entertain a motion.
I motion to approve tonight's agenda. This is Chachi.
I have a motion from Dave. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a second for Mr. Costin. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda accepted. When we call, just real quick, when we're calling the question on something like this, which we won't be doing anymore for the rest of the evening, but just to give you a heads up, on meeting 3, it's going to be structured a little differently, so the delegates will have that opportunity. So now you're wondering how that's going to be done. We'll go over that on meeting 3. Okay. You can also put something in the comments if you do object. I have no problem with that at all. We'll get to that. And I'll make sure also that before we call the question on something important, we're going to have that's in that open forum will be there available to you as well. We're going to go slower when we have those types of opportunities to allow for the messages to drop in the chat box. Okay. So I've already done number 5. So we're going to skip down to number 6. I'm going to introduce Dave McCary, our chair, to present the introduction of the FPA Executive Committee. Dave, I'm sorry if I did a little bit of that earlier, but I'll allow you to provide some comments on what the Executive Committee has been up to.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and that is perfectly fine. I'll make this very, very, very brief. At this point, I'd like to introduce the FPA Executive Committee, which is chaired by myself, as well as Mr. Michael Jackson, the FPA Executive VP and CEO, as well as our current president, Mr. Joseph Scuro, our president-elect, Mr. Dan Buffington, our other exec member, Jeff Bush, and Ms. Kim Jones. and that is our executive committee, and we are very proud and happy to serve each and every one of you and all of our FPA members. Thank you. At this point, I would like to turn the microphone over to our current president, Mr. Joe Scuro.
Thank you, David, and thanks everyone for taking time to be part of this tonight. I know everyone's had a long day, and we will try to make this as brief as possible. And I just want to reiterate how much I appreciate everyone's participation. On the face of FPA, we've been getting a lot of questions because it appeared that not a lot had been going on. But I assure you that behind the scenes, your leadership was putting in overtime on this particular issue of key importance. I can't express how important this is. When I first came aboard, many of you know my sort of split background. I started to observe that there were some discrepancies in our governing documents. As we dove deeper, the disparity between the governing documents was so great that we were left with a position of not knowing which one was in operation, which one controlled. Historically, this dates back probably to the 40s. There was an article of incorporation created that established the association. And for those without legal backgrounds or business backgrounds, an article of incorporation for a business is sort of like a birth certificate. And that birth certificate is filed with the state. And then through time, it's modified to keep the state and the public aware of the changes that corporation is undergoing. Add to it that we are a non-for-profit, puts us in a more precarious situation for not having legal documents with the state that are appropriate and running by the appropriate rules. Where the dilemma occurred is the original bylaw or the original articles of incorporation created an executive committee and did not speak to the board of directors or the association as we all know it on this chat line now. In somewhere around the 40s, like I said, they adopted a constitution, and that in essence sort of created this conversion to what we kind of know today. The problem was that there was no internal link from one document to the other so that one document would ratify the changes. And the original articles really weren't readdressed until somewhere around 1979. And at that point, that change still hadn't taken place. So it left us in a position where, for the multitude of years that I've covered, the items that were approved by the board of directors were not really being approved because legally there was no board of directors. Now that's just Joe's opinion, part-time lawyer, part-time pharmacist. So we wanted to go a step beyond that. And so we hired local counsel, very skilled and knowledgeable in this particular area. Also had a history of previously being the legal counsel for the association. We felt that they would have probably the best background historically to take a look at this and either agree or disagree and come up with recommendations on how we can fix it. And so with that sort of walk around the barn, that's where we're at right now, is taking a look at what our governance expert told us, what our legal team told us, and what the executive committee rifled through and kind of formatted. And what's before you tonight are 3 changes to the articles that will bring us to where we know we've been in incorporating the Constitution and reinstating a legitimate and bona fide board of directors so that those decisions can go forward. And so with that, I will pass it on to Dr. McCary again for introduction of Article 1.
Thank you, President Scurro. Appreciate that, and thank you for those words. So right now, I'd like to do the presentation of the proposed changes to the FPA Articles of Incorporation. The one I will be presenting in the order is going to be Article number 1. Pursuant to the provisions of Section 617.1006 Florida statutes, this not-for-profit corporation adopts the following amendments to its Articles of Incorporation. Article 1, the name. The name of this corporation is the Florida Pharmacy Association, Inc., the association. The principal place of business of such corporation is 610 North Adams Street, Tallahassee, Florida, zip code 32301, or at such other place within the state of Florida as may be deemed necessary, expedient, or convenient by the board of directors of the association. And that ends the changes of any regarding of the Article 1 for the name and address of the Florida Pharmacy Association. So at this point, Mr. Speaker, I now will pause to answer, along with any assistance that I may require, to our Executive VP, Mr. Michael Jackson, for any questions or comments from the House of Delegates at this time.
Thank you, Mr. McCary. Before we do that, I'd like to have Mr. Jackson give us any type of background information on why this change has to be made as well.
Be glad to, Mr. Chair, and to the members who are on this call, briefly, our Articles of Incorporation is a document that the state has, and Dr. Scurro artfully explained to you what they are. They are the principal documents of which we must work under and abide under. Every not-for-profit organization has one. And so here we have a situation where the articles that are on file with the Division of Corporations has our address at 201 West Park Avenue, and we have not been there since I was in college. So you see how dated this information is. The intent here with this change to Article 1 was to correct the current date of the association and also to correct the entity that has jurisdiction over the governance of the association, which, as we know it today, is not the executive committee, which you heard reference to that several times, because currently that's what the state says it should have, and instead changing that to the board of directors, which is the entity that you know is what you elect to serve as your leaders for the association. And so this is a fairly simple fix and something I would recommend that the House adopts and approves. So you have one hand that's raised for a question from Paul Ackerman. Mr. Speaker, do you wish to recognize?
Yes, and I'll unmute you, Paul, right now.
I just unmuted it.
Oh, perfect.
Are we combining Article 1 and 2? Is that the purpose also? Because he said this was just going to be Article 1. They were separated in the original, I believe.
So let me try to answer that, if I may, Mr. Chair. An excellent question. Article 1 and Article 4 are on the same document. And I think the question that needs to be asked, which will be on Tuesday, January 26th, is to support the change to Article 1 and Article 6. The intent with adopting these two articles together in one statement is to send, to make sure that the articles are aligned with itself. So for example, if the House said, well, I want Article 1, but I may not want Article 6. What you have done by not adopting both at the same time, you've continued to create or allow for conflict within the Florida Pharmacy Association, because you'll have board of directors listed on one article and you have executive committee listed on the other. So these two articles are congruent with each other. We're just introducing them to you one at a time so you can understand what we need to do. Thank you for your question.
Does that answer your question, Paul?
Yeah, it's more efficient this way. So no problem.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. All right. Do we have any other questions at the moment? Please use, for those of you who might have missed the beginning, use the chat function to raise your hand under the participants tab, and then we will acknowledge you. And again, if you don't have your questions in now, you will be able to provide them through written comment. Okay, yeah, this was a very innocuous change, something that we just had to get done. So let's move on to Article 5, and that would be our President-elect, Mr. Dan Buffington.
Great. Correction, Article 6.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Michael did a great summary there in the fact that these two need to be corrected to be consistent. So in Article 6, it really previously defined the executive committee, but correctly now defines board of directors and officers. So I'll read it in its new form, but you'll see we really just substituted the correct term of board of directors and then defined who those individuals are. The affairs of the association shall be managed by the board of directors, of which the immediate past president shall serve as the chairman. It shall consist of the president-elect, the immediate past president, the treasurer, the executive vice president, the president of the Florida Society of Health System Pharmacists, the speaker of the House of Delegates, the vice speaker of the House of Delegates, 9 elected directors who will serve staggered terms, 1 elected student director, and 1 elected pharmacist technician. You'll also notice a change in the term there that the previous language used the term secretary, but it's the EVP that will be serving in that role. The officers of the association shall be the president, a president-elect, a treasurer, and executive vice president. In the event of the death, disability, resignation, non-residence, or removal from office of any officer of the association, or in the event any elective officer shall for any reason be unable or unwilling to act, then in such an event, the board of directors shall appoint the successor in office of the said officer for the unexpired term of office. Any questions about the change in terminology?
Okay, we do have a hand raised. We have a few. We will start with Mr. Ed Hamilton. I'm going to unmute you now. Mr. Hamilton?
Hey, good evening. Just one question for you. Dan, on the elected pharmacist technician, is that the language you want to use, or pharmacy technician?
I don't know that it would be considered, I think it would be considered a difference. So that might be a Scribner's error on that one.
I would suggest you use pharmacy technician.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton.
Thanks.
I think I actually see another, and that's in the bottom paragraph of the 2, where it says, in the event any elective officer shall.
Correct.
That should be elected.
Yep. Yeah, please bring these up to us. These are great points. We need to make sure these are fine-tuned, and we've seen them a bunch of times, but it's always good to see have your content, your comments, and your eyes on them too. Mr. Como, you are acknowledged. And you are unmuted, sir.
Tom, we don't hear you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
On the first
David.
paragraph, should it say the executive vice president of the Florida Pharmacy Association? It just says the executive vice president of who?
I think it would be presumed, or it could just say executive vice president of the associations. That's
Well, it should say something. We can't presume.
correct.
And on the second paragraph, it says, and an executive vice president. Once again, an executive vice president of, Donald Trump's corporation. We have to be specific. We are pharmacists.
Right.
So
It goes on in that second paragraph, also says officer of the association. So of the association seems to be the consistent term in both those places.
I would be the vice president, the executive. I don't like the word "and." I think it should be "and the executive vice president."
Correct.
So we have the word "and" an executive vice president. It could be an executive vice president of the hospital association.
Understood.
Thank you.
Mr. Como.
Michael?
Next.
Okay, thank you for allowing me to comment, and I appreciate, these are very good comments, very excellent comments, but I want to make sure I remind the House that this change in language is actually extracted from our current bylaws. So while if we're going to make some subtle changes to this, then we'll have to align up our bylaws or our Constitution with the same language if we elect to keep the Constitution. So I thought I'd share that with you. The attorney who worked with us came up with this language using current language that we have in our existing documents. Just want to share that with you. Thank you.
Yes, we're only looking at the changes underlined or taken out of these articles. Okay. Mrs. Thompson, I'm unmuting you right now. You're recognized. I do want to remind everyone, you do have to unmute yourself. I'm sorry. I can unmute you, but you also have to unmute yourself. I apologize. I didn't say that in advance.
There we go. Okay. In Article 1 name, it says Florida Pharmacy Association. So every time you mention association, it obviously refers to the Florida Pharmacy Association and not Duval County or something else like that. I don't think that there's a problem with not spelling out Florida Pharmacy Association in every paragraph.
That's correct. And as Mr. Jackson mentioned, this was looked over by an attorney. It wasn't just us, plugging in comments and adding this language. So, they made sure that this was, abiding by the Florida statutes. Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Is there anyone else? I don't see any more hands. I see a panelist with a hand up. I didn't see that one over there. Sorry about that. And that is Kathy. I think, yep, I can unmute you, but I think you can unmute yourself as well. Go for it. Sorry.
I think it was Gary.
Was it Gary? Whoever, if you raise your hand as a panelist, I'm pretty sure, and I'm glad this did happen so I could figure this out. I think you will be able to just unmute yourself and I'll just let you know that it's your go. So whoever that was, please, it is your floor.
Eric, I think it was me, and I'm not sure if we can actually do what I was just going to suggest. This is Barbara, because we pulled this from our bylaws, but the second paragraph of Article 6, where it lists the officers, does not include the immediate past president in this current language. I don't know if that's something we need to add to this or if it's covered in the first paragraph. I'll let Mr. Jackson.
Yeah, I'm going to defer to Mr. Jackson on that one. That's a great point.
Okay, very good question that Barbara has raised, that the immediate past president is not included on the list of officers. And interesting enough, it's never been that way. However, in your sub-governing documents, it creates something called a president's committee, which does include the immediate immediate past president. And certainly this is something that I would encourage the leadership to take a look at downstream, and to align the term officer and align the term president's committee into one entity so that you don't have two separate entities. So a very good observation. I am open either way, but and if there's a desire to modify that to include the immediate past president as the officer, that I think it's an excellent suggestion. But you do have something called a president's committee, which does include the officers and the immediate past president, and they're given certain authority to do things by your board of directors. Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chairman, this is Gary Costin. There's a comment from Genevieve Montanez, a housekeeping request that the past president, in that first sentence where it says immediate past president should be capitalized.
Thank you, Gary. I did not see that. That slid by me. Okay. Thank you for those comments. You know, I kind of agree with, I definitely agree with Barbara on the inconsistency there, but, and maybe this is something that we address, again, Michael said downstream or next scheduled House of Delegates meeting, or, you know, feel free to put in a resolution or something that the board of directors can work on, you know, later on. I don't think that's something we should address now, just kind of, since it's been this way, we kind of, we do this piecewise. But I do think that whatever Barbara mentioned needs to be addressed. I do agree.
Right. It is an iterative process, meaning we can keep improving the alignment between all documents.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything we're doing here is a work in progress, right? This is the first piece. After that, we can start going through and really honing in, you know, our documents accordingly. So, but I want to make sure we're making note of what Ms. Beadle recommended, because I think it's very important. Okay, so I don't see any more questions or hands raised. So we're going to move on to Article, make sure I get this right, 8. My Roman numerals are good tonight. And that will be President Mr. Scurro. You have the floor.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone. Article 8, amendments to Articles of Incorporation, removing and bylaws. Amendments to these Articles of Incorporation shall be approved by the Board of Directors by a 3/4 vote of those voting members present at any regular or special meeting of the Board of Directors called for that purpose. At least 30 days prior to approval, the Board of Directors shall provide written notice of the proposed amendment to the House of Delegates for its review and comment in a manner set forth in the bylaws. And I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Any questions on that, or anyone on the board want to clarify anything there? I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I do see a hand raised. I'm going to give everyone time for hand raised. I'm not going to rush through this, I promise. I know that we have to digest it before we can get our questions aligned, so we'll take that time. I see there was a hand. There it is. Oh, it's gone. There it is. I believe that is you, Ms. Thompson. I will unmute you right now, and you're recognized, ma'am.
Is there another place that mentions how we amend the bylaws besides this paragraph? Because you're not, obviously you're not eliminating the bylaws, because you mentioned in the farther down that the House comments in a manner set forth in the bylaws. So if this doesn't include how you amend the bylaws, is that included somewhere else?
Yes, ma'am. That will be a subject for a future gathering. The purpose of tonight is to provide the required changes to the articles that would allow the articles to stand functional in relationship with the current Constitution.
Is the requirement different for the bylaws and for the.
And again, that will be discussed at a later meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great comment. Thank you. I don't see any other hands. There we go. Looks like they're on delay.
Yeah, I have one up, Jeff, Eric.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. We're going to go ahead with Ms. Beadle will go first. I do see Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Como. You guys will be coming up on deck.
Okay. Joe, could you kind of clarify when it says in here, provide the written notice to the House for its review and comment. So the House will not actually have a vote about this, only the board will. I want to make sure I understand the process. I know the House is still involved in the bylaws part for now, but I just want to make sure I understand when you say comment, what happens to the comments when the House provides those to the board?
The excellent question. We knew that was an issue that needs debate. And so we wanted to be able to focus on building a articles of incorporation that were strong and legal and legally sufficient, but still mention the process so that it was before us. And that discussion, the committee chose not to put it into this meeting so that we would be able to stay focused on just the articles. So it's mentioned here. What this allows is for real-time updates to the articles of incorporation. I would submit one of the reasons that we're in this situation today is because the way it existed, the bylaws and the articles and the Constitution were all put in the same pot. And so therefore the executive director really had handcuffs on to be able to make the required changes to the articles of incorporation in a yearly timely manner. So the focus here is to be able to shift that so that the board can make those changes to the articles and allow the House of Delegates to give notice. And the bylaw changes, we'll see that in a later discussion where we can talk about what is the best approach. Do we leave it with the House? Do we leave it with the House of Delegates, the Board of Directors? So we wanted to bifurcate that so that we could just focus again on the articles of incorporation and making them sufficient and allowing our executive director and the board to have the ability to make real-time changes, even little things like the address and so forth. But great question. It certainly will not be dropped. You have my word on that, but that's why it's mentioned here so that we will tie that piece together with much more discussion later.
Okay, but I'm not sure you actually answered the question. When it says review and comment, that does mean that the House of Delegates will not have a vote in whether or not the articles are changed. And you may have, I just may have completely understood all of it.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Barbara and Joe. Okay, Mr. Hamilton, you are now recognized and unmuted, sir.
I think Joe and Barbara answered my question. I was confused, but it's just the articles of incorporation, so I understand it now. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I have Mr. Como. You are ready to go. Unmuted, sir. The floor is yours.
I agree with that, Mr. Hamilton. I also agree because I think that was a lot of the confusion with the House of Delegates that we understand now it is the Articles of Incorporation only, and that but when you see what's happening, the way if you look at behind, you see the paragraph that's deleted when everybody looks at it, you're taking away the approval of the House of Delegates. You got to realize the perception that's out there by the membership. You see what that line says, that you're taking away the voting privilege. And I think that's Barbara was trying to say. That's the thing I was getting from a lot of the membership being a past president. They saw the perception of them losing the votes. I understand now it's only the articles of incorporation.
Yes, sir.
To be honest with you, if I was on what you guys did, I would have put in the fact that you're not losing your voting privileges to be able to handle your association. You're just losing the articles of incorporation, but you didn't do that. You're dealing with actual members. The members were upset because they thought they were losing their voting privileges. I understand that because I'm a past president. The actual members still don't. They still call me and still think they're losing their voting privileges. Thank you.
Yes, sir. No, I appreciate that. And we wanted to make that perfectly clear that we're not in any fashion doing that. This is, and Michael Monet made a really great point in the chat. I'm going to read it real quick. The best example is if the FPA moved across the street, Article 1 would need to change the address. And this provision gives 3/4 of the board to change Article 1. That does not need to come to the House of Delegates for approval. We need to give, Mr. Jackson the ability to make these changes so we can operate on a day-to-day basis without having any barriers. And that's what this is all about. So I appreciate that comment. Thank you, Mr. Como. I have another hand raised from Ms. Toll. You are unmuted.
I don't even know if this computer has a microphone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yay. So we keep talking about changes to the articles. How often do we anticipate that we would change the articles? Because to me, it seems like this isn't something that's done a lot, but we're talking about every time we need to change the articles like it's something that's common. So I just love to hear from somebody that has a little experience with changing articles and how often we anticipate that might happen.
I would think that would be Mr. Jackson. How often, I don't mean to put you on the spot, how often would you think we'd need to make these amendments?
I would say that the need to go and revisit our articles becomes necessary whenever the legislature makes a change to Florida statutes that deal with not-for-profit corporations. So, for example, the legislature can meet in March, and then by the end of April, they could make a modification saying that something has to be in or something has to take out of our articles. And once it's law, we have to act on that. And we have to get our general membership to support that change, even though the legislature said, thou shalt do this. And if the membership said, no, we don't want you to do this, then we're forced to be out of compliance with the statute. So I'm not an attorney. I have to rely upon more wiser folks like Michael Monet and Joe Scuro to speak to that. But it's not, to answer your question, Dr. Toll, it is not often that we need to do that. As a matter of fact, most articles that I see today are really short and very vague. And you put a lot of definition around your bylaws. And I think that's what the trend is today in not-for-profit organizations. So it is, I think the members can be comfortable in knowing that you have some guardrails around the board of directors. There is actually a fairly high threshold for the board to act on changes to the bylaws. Rather, the articles of incorporation. So it takes 75% of the board under this change to initiate this. And they can't make the change until they've had an opportunity to present it to the House of Delegates and receive comments. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. We're going to get back to the other hands raised. Let me go to Mr. Monet. You can unmute yourself.
Yep, I did. You can hear me, right?
Yes, sir.
16 years on the ACPE board, we had to change them once, Teresa. So it doesn't happen that often, but to Michael's point, it really depends upon what the legislature does with respect to not-for-profit corporations. There, it's going to be a necessity, and you need to be able to adapt in what this particular provision does is it gives you the opportunity to adapt very quickly to be in compliance with the statute.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question, Mr. Speaker. Whenever. I don't have to ask it now, but I would like to ask a follow-up.
You can have it right now. Yes,
Thank you. So I think, as I remember back to this summer when our attorney was weighing in on this, it seems like we talked about the articles superseding all of our other governing documents. So as we make this change here to say that the articles can be amended by the board of directors, and I know that Joe mentioned the bylaws are going to be looked at later. Does this set precedent for our bylaws to be changed to also be amended by the board of directors?
Mr. Jackson, yep, can answer that for her.
I'm actually thankful that you asked that question because I've kind of got a hint from Barbara and others who are asking questions about that very particular thing. So if you look very carefully at what's on your screen, it says you're amending Article 8, which says amendments to articles of incorporation and bylaws. So we should be operating under what that says over the years, and we actually hadn't been doing that. So by removing the words and bylaws, in my opinion, this allows an opportunity for the members to determine how the bylaws are to be changed. So right now, in order for the bylaws to be changed, it has to come before the House of Delegates, it has to be introduced, has to be read at the annual meeting and all that stuff. If it's the desire of the membership to retain that, I don't think that that creates a conflict with this, because this is being revised only to address the articles of incorporation. It doesn't address anything downstream. So the bylaws can be determined however way you want the bylaws to be addressed. And if I'm wrong on that, please somebody correct me, because I'm struggling tonight.
Michael, hey, this is Mr. Chair. This is Joe. You spoke eloquently and right on point. This is to simply address modifications to the articles of incorporation. The bylaws will be controlled by a completely different provision to be discussed at a later time.
Thank you. I see you, Barbara. Go ahead.
Yep, sorry, just a follow-up question on this. The new articles state that we have to bring the proposed amendment to the House of Delegates for review and comment anyway. So it has to go to the House of Delegates before the board can actually do anything. Wouldn't it seem simpler to change review and comment to, some form that gives the House a little more say in whether or not or somehow the membership has a say in how the articles get changed? I mean, it's going to the House anyway, so it's not like this is gonna create some fast track to change if we move across the street, because it still has to wait till the summer to go before the House of Delegates. So I guess my confusion is, why then does the House is the House not able to participate in the change? They can comment, but they don't actually have a say in whether or not. And I think that was part of what the whole issue was over the summer and stuff, and of course we're not going to rehash all that here because this is a separate matter. But I think that if we're going to keep that level of confidence, I mean, everybody knows that articles of incorporation don't get changed every other month or anything like that. But I think if the House has a say in it, that it might be something that could maybe go a little more smoothly, since it has to go to them anyway. Just curious.
Thank you. I think the House does have a say in it because they can review and comment. That does give the authorization for the House to do that, the opportunity. I will defer to Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Barbara, again, for asking that very thoughtful question. I mean, you are all over this, and I can't wait for the day for me to step down and you sit in this seat and run this association, because you're very very thoughtful on this stuff. So to answer your question on whether or not the House would have a say in this process, please bear in mind and keep this in your memory banks. You have elected members of the FPA Board of Directors. And if I'm reading this correctly, the Board of Directors would also consist of, from the previous articles we looked at, is not the Speaker of the House and the Vice Speaker of the House sit on the board. Okay, and let's see here. Yes, they do. So technically the House has 2 voices on the Board of Directors with which to express concerns or issues with any proposed changes to the articles that the House may have discomfort with. So if the House is filing a lot of comments with concerns over proposed changes that are before the Board of Directors, and if for whatever reason the advocates elected by the House don't perform their duties and speak to what the House wants, then there's a leadership concern there. So I think indirectly, while the House itself, the large House of up to 100 folks, don't necessarily have a vote, so to speak, they have an indirect vote by charging the Speaker of the House, the Vice Speaker of the House, and to some extent the EVP, that hey, we're screaming out here, we don't necessarily like this provision in the articles because we think it will do this, that, or other thing. They have to be your spokesman and advocate for the House's concern. So absent that, I think that's my recommendation, my suggestion, to maybe try to help give some comfort to the House that they still have a voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Don't see any hands raised. Thank you for answering all those questions. Oh, I think that, is that you, Mr. McCary?
Yes, it is. If I'm not sure, I thought I tried to raise my hand.
You're okay.
Thank you, sir. Actually, it's just a quick question or point of information. Regarding where it says on the second line, shall be approved by the Board of Directors by a 3/4 vote of those members present. So I was trying to do the math to figure out how many total we have and what that would need to be as a passing vote of 3/4 of those people attending, not the total amount, but those people attending to, as it's written there, in order for it to pass. And then my second point of information would be, how about when we have proxies? Does their vote, would that actually constitute a vote as well for proxies? And if somebody could clarify those 2 questions, I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Jackson.
Okay, Mr. Chair, excellent question. I think that's one of those getting into the details of how all this stuff works. And I think a lot of that probably is best articulated in the bylaws, because the bylaws kind of talk about meetings, quorum, votes, and things like that the articles don't necessarily define. And you really don't want that level of detail in your articles, because the articles are considered a more or less a corporate document that says to the state, this is who you are. And then bylaws say, this is how you do who you are. So I think there's enough information in the bylaws to kind of talk about quorum and meetings and things like that that will help to answer your question. But rest assured that 75% of 10 members attending the meeting, I guess you can do the math, it's going to be a number greater than 5, much greater than 5.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do have another, I guess, in a QA field. Mr. Como has one more question. I'm going to click to unmute you, sir.
I thank you.
There you
I
go.
think I'll be real quick, because I think I may come up with maybe one of the, I guess, challenges that we faced a couple of years ago at a convention. Teresa, Ed, maybe you can come in and comment on this. I think this maybe solves the whole problem. The articles of incorporation, again, being a president, past president, everything that has to go with it. The problem is the incorporation. I think once again, the confusion comes in is that when we were discussing in the House of Delegates, everything went a little mumbo jumbo. We were discussing resolutions, and as the resolutions were coming in, everybody got confused that the resolutions were being taken over by the executive committee. I was on the executive committee. We have to explain, these articles of incorporation. If tomorrow the state comes in and says, okay, you got 15 minutes to pay us your money, or, we're going to defunct you, we don't need to go to the House of Delegates to do this. The members don't understand that. They think the executive committee is coming in and taking away their rights to do resolutions. Okay, I was there at the two conventions ago. This is where the confusion is coming in. It's the resolutions that they're upset about. It's not these articles of incorporation. They don't need to go to the House of Delegates. Like I said, tomorrow, if the state came in and said, you got to pay us $1,000 or we're going to take away your articles of incorporation, it doesn't have to go to the House of Delegates. The problem came in is that we're trying to change what they perceived as changing and taking away their right to vote. That's what we're talking about here. Okay, we went ahead and we tried to change the whole thing of the FPA. These people are paying membership dues. They want to go to a House of Delegate and they want to vote. Okay, they want to make a resolution saying tomorrow they can wear a badge that says a different color. They don't want it going to an executive committee to tell them if they're right or wrong. That's what we're doing here, guys. We're making a mountain out of a molehill. Make the articles of incorporation, give it the executive committee. You don't have to go to a House of Delegates, okay? If tomorrow we got to change the address, it doesn't have to go to a House of Delegates. But leave the guys with their resolutions. They want to fight about what color or whatever they want to change the flag to on the outside of the pole. Leave that to them, and that doesn't go to an executive committee. They want the right, because they pay their dues every year. They want the right to fight in the House of Delegates. This is where all the confusion is coming from. Teresa, Ed, if you want to jump in, be my guest.
Thank you, Mr. Como. I appreciate that. And you're absolutely correct. This is the operations of the business. This is not suppressing voices of our members. That's the last thing we want to do and that we're going to do. And that's not the point. So you're absolutely spot on. This has to do with the ability to run a business, essentially. And a lot of our members, a lot of our pharmacy members don't operate their own business or understand how this works. I mean, I didn't when I was young and I came out of school too. So, I appreciate that comment. Anyone else have anything else to add? Okay, I appreciate that. Again, let this digest. You got the written comment period. We're giving everyone plenty of time to get these questions out to us. We're going to move on to letter D. So, Mr. Scuro, your final remarks.
I just want to say thanks everyone for attending and the really wonderful dialogue. And hopefully this was helpful, and it's given us clarification of what we need to do and the intent behind it. And again, just in closing, I want to thank Michael for his great commentary and filling in the gaps of the questioning, and great job to our speaker for keeping this moving along timely. And again, I just want to thank everybody for participating, and please send the comments, send the questions. We will be actively responding and trying to build the best document that we can so that we can get this corrected in a timely fashion. We just leave you with this in the background. It's something that must be resolved. We cannot function until we've gotten past this. So I really, again, just appreciate everyone's opportunity tonight to join and participate. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Gary Costin, I think you went over Mr. Jackson's summary of deadlines and processes.
I think that's next. Am I wrong? I did not mean to. If I did, Gary, that's certainly not.
You did, but that's
I did.
okay.
Sorry about that. Man, I'm looking at letter D, and I definitely listen. It's been a long day. Sorry about that. All right, so now we'll go to Mr. Jackson. Please give us one of the most important pieces to this, and that's how to submit written comments and track us over the next 3 weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll be real brief because it's almost the top of the hour. This meeting was noticed for 2 hours, and you're giving everybody almost 50 minutes back. Congratulations. So 2 things I want to share with you. One is I want to make sure everybody understands that, okay, since we've been operating under a board of directors for a number of years, and we shouldn't have had a board of directors, it should have been an executive committee, because you heard that term several times tonight. The executive committee is the entity over the FPA currently. That the question raised, and it's one we asked of council, how do we deal with a board that has been doing things all these years and setting policy in place and all this kind of stuff? How do we validate what they've done? And the executive committee adopted, passed, and presented to you as part of the information on the website, a resolution memorializing everything that the board of directors has done. Essentially, the executive committee said, the association is in good hands. The board has been doing great work. Thank you so much for holding us together. And that's what that resolution does. So we're in good shape there. The other thing I want to share with you as we get ready to close out is, where do I file my comments? So on this website that I've sent links to you to get to, that has a lot of information that is shared with you tonight, if you scroll all the way down to the very, very bottom of the website, you'll see a submission tool. And when you sign in, it will already pre-populate you with your information. All you have to do is add in what region that you live in. So I would put in region 1. Browse for your document, because you want to create a document and put it in here. And then add the document, click submit, and it will send it to us. Please, I ask you to not email the document to the FPA office or fax it to us or send it by mail. Definitely don't send anything by mail these days, because the U.S. Postal Service is overwhelmed. I don't know if you experienced that or not, but definitely use this tool, send it to us through this tool. What we will do is we'll take what your written comments are and we'll publish it on the website for all to see. I will also make sure that members of the gang of 6, I call them, the executive committee, take a close look at your comments, look at them very, very carefully, and be prepared to answer any questions or comments that you have for our meeting for next Tuesday. And so with that, I stand aside and allow any opportunity for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Last opportunity for comments here. I'm just kind of waiting to see if any last minute hands raised. I don't see any, so that's fantastic. I do want to, in closing, I want to say a couple things. First, please reach out to any of those delegates who have not been able to attend tonight that you know that may have questions, and please have them reference this video, or please submit their questions before next meeting if they possibly can. And also, I mean, Michael has put a lot of work into this. So is our executive committee. So I want to thank all you guys for all the work you've done here. I mean, I've done absolutely nothing, and I'm sorry about that. But you know, we are trying to promote complete transparency, give our members the platform that they deserve and enough time to submit their questions, and give everyone that good feeling that what we're doing is correct here, and provide any kind of changes that we have. So I want to thank you, Mr. Jackson, and everyone in the executive committee that's been working on this over the past couple months. And you know, I think that, you know, the way we've set this up is kind of a model for the future. Possibly, if there's anything like this that comes up again, I'm hoping that the next couple meetings kind of facilitate appropriate, you know, something that our members can appreciate. And I thank you all for that. And I also want to thank the House delegates, the board, for all your help and attending this and taking time out of your busy schedules to join us on this. Your commentary has been excellent, and your support. So with that said, I will entertain a motion to adjourn at 7:08.
So move.
Second.
I have a second. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
All right, this meeting is adjourned at 7:08. Thank you so much, everyone, and we will touch base with you and see you next Tuesday.
Nice
Good
job,
night.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.